All right. Welcome, everyone, to another Film Roundtable. My name's Maria Prieto, and I'm here to introduce our two very exciting panelists, and our very special guest moderator today. But before we jump into that conversation, I'm going to lead us through a moment of silence to honor all reported 2,288,655 worldwide COVID deaths as of today. We're recording this on February 5th, 2021. We would also like to honor all of our Black and Brown brothers and sisters, as well as our First Nations brothers and sisters whose lives have been taken by the hands of police brutality and other senseless acts of violence. Thank you. Thanks, guys. We hold this space of silence just as a reminder that, we're still in the midst of this pandemic, and to just emphasize the importance of being safe and being empathetic and caring towards one another.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we've been excited about this roundtable for a while now. I'm happy that it worked out, that we have you three together right now. So yeah, I'm thrilled to introduce Sofia Coppola and producer Youree Henley. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for asking us, and we're happy to try to shed any light on anything we've learned over the years. So we're glad to be part of this. Thank you.
Of course. And I also want to welcome our guest moderator today, Chase Sui.
Woo! Yeah.
Chase is a filmmaker, a writer, and an actress. And she recently appeared in Sofia's film On the Rocks, which was produced by Youree. So we have this little team back together. Chase, thank you for taking the time to lead this conversation.
Of course, I'm so excited and honored.
Before I hand you the reins, I just want to remind our listeners to subscribe to the YouTube channel, to our podcast, follow us on Instagram, and that's where you'll get updates for all of these roundtables. And you can catch On the Rocks on Apple TV, so check that out if you haven't already. So, Chase, it's all yours.
Thank you, Maria. All right. Hi, Youree. Hi, Sofia.
Hi, we're glad to talk to you today.
I'm so happy to see your faces. So I kind of want to just start out by picking your guys' brains about how this match came to be made and how you guys met each other and found each other.
Yeah, we met through my brother Roman, who Youree worked with producing commercials. Do I have this right, Youree? It's so long. And Roman was and is a fan of Youree and thought that I would like him, and I was getting ready to do Somewhere in LA, and so Roman suggested that I meet Youree. That's how we met, right? I mean, we met before, but how we started working together.
Socially, but we hadn't worked together, and that was the first time. And it was, I'd been working a lot at the Directors Bureau, and I had been working mostly in music videos and commercials, and I really wanted to do a movie. Like that's what I got into this to begin with. And I think at that time, it's a little different now, but at that time it felt very much like you could work in commercials and videos and be working pretty steadily, but like the film world felt really far away, and I remember it was really like the Bureau was one of the few places that I felt like, I loved the work that was being done there, and I liked the culture of that company, and I loved Mike and Roman, and I also felt like they were also closer to that because it was run by filmmakers. Roman would do videos, but he also made movies. Same with Mike, same with Sofia. And so when Roman asked me, I remember the day specifically, he has this really cool office on Cosmo Street. And I remember that. And I don't know if I've ever told you this, Sofia, but I remember he was like, it was at that time too, I felt very detached from it. I was sort of like, what am I doing? I'm working in advertising now. I just want to make movies. And it was really wonderful. Roman said, so can I see you in my office? And I went into his office, which is like the size of it's very small, but it's perfectly appointed, but it feels almost like you're in like a steamer trunk, it's like this really beautiful, or like a train cabin, and it had like a little built-in chair, and I'm sitting there with him, which I'd been in there quite a bit working with him. And he said, so my sister, I had no idea what it was about. He goes, so my sister's doing a movie, and it's going to be in Los Angeles. And like, I think I might have just at that point blurted out like, yes, like I'll do anything. Like I was such a fan, and I so wanted to do it. And Roman really, you know, he introduced me to Sofia, and we got along, and so that was sort of the beginning. But I will never forget that opportunity. I'll never forget it. I was so thrilled, you know, and I was so, I would just wanted it to happen. And, you know, these things, they take a while. Like I think from the time Roman talked to me about it to the time we ended up actually making the movie, I don't know, it could have been a year, you know, and
Blur. I feel like when you think back on the
me
movie,
too, but I remember that for some, you know.
no, but I never heard that story, but I remember meeting Youree around and Roman always talking so highly, and then suggesting that we work together on that, and then we've been doing stuff and having fun at it ever since.
Yeah.
I remember when I was just starting out, like, or trying to figure out what I was doing in my early 20s, and older friends saying, you know, just spend the next 10 years like finding your people, find your team. And I think that was such good advice. So I thought I want to pass that on, because, you know, so much of what we do is so collaborative, but you know, just trying, like, you know, trying different people, working. That's why commercials were great, because like you try out a DP or meet people, and your team is such a big part of it. So just kind of spending that time or investing that focus and just trying to find your team and people that you connect with. And and I feel so, just working with Youree, like it's so, when, you know, when you're for a producer, it's rare, I think, to find someone that has your taste or gets your taste and sensibility, or that's so important, and really know what's important to you, and to have that person that's there as your partner and protecting you is so important, because there's so many different agendas and finance people and executives, and to have your producer that you really trust and is really looking out just for, you know, your vision, and there to protect that and make a good movie is so,
so
vital.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Wow. And do you guys feel like that first meeting, that kind of first meeting was was it a kind of creative coming together? Like you guys were kind of sniffing out each other's sensibilities, or did it feel just more kind of casual, like a get to know you?
Yeah.
I just remember us starting to work together, and I think as you work together, you start to get to know that person better.
Yeah, I think also, like, I learned so much on that first movie. It was really kind of the first movie I ever really made, you know, and also I wanted to go back a little bit, like the commercial stuff that I had done. The beauty of working in videos and commercials was like you could work on a volume of things, and you're constantly working with new DPs and new production designers. So by the time I was given the opportunity to actually make a movie, I had years of production experience that really served me. Now, I still felt imposter syndrome. I still felt insecure going into the first movie. I still was so like, oh my God, I'm working with a Bond company now, and I'm working with Focus Features, and I'm working with Sofia Coppola and Harris Savides, and all these things were like, it was like a dream, but it was also a bit intimidating, you know? And that first experience, I remember, was a bit of a blur, but I just knew, I felt like when I read the script, and I was already a fan of Sofia's work, and I just remember really loving the relationship between Johnny and his daughter, and I loved the whole thing. You know, I just loved that we were like making a movie together, and I had never gone through that before. And the things I gleaned from that experience, I actually try to carry with me, because like I learned so much working with Harris. I learned so much working with Sofia. I still learn things, but I mean, like, that first experience that I had, it was such a unique experience too, and I'll never, ever forget it. I try to take a piece of that with me into everything that I do, because it was just a really beautiful filmmaking experience, you know? And
I feel lucky that we got to keep it so small like that. I think that was part of it. We tried to keep it as small as we can, because you want to have that feeling on set, and it's hard to, production just seemed to grow and grow. So I think we always want to, you know, kind of like the way you do student films is the spirit that is always the best, to keep it as intimate and personal as you
Yeah.
I remember reading the script and having a little thing. I remember talking to Harris about it, and I was such a fan of his, and I remember like a couple of things. One was it was a pretty sparse script. It was like, as far as like what was actually written. And I remember we had a certain amount of days, and I had a certain training of trying to do a volume of work in a day, and I thought, gosh, you're always trying to bring the budget down and do certain things. And I thought, gosh, we really have a lot of time in these certain areas. And I remember talking to Harris about it, and Harris was like, he really drove home, and Mac Brown too, who was amazing to work with on that. They really drove home to me that like, it was really about preserving that space. I think I remember Harris saying like, how great would it be if like, we ended up shooting something and then we came back and we shot it again, and I was like, that's fucking crazy, but like, it was that sort of thing where it was like, allow there to be enough room to have it be fluid, so you don't feel like filmmaking, you have a gun to your head constantly, and to not have that, to try to elbow out that room is something that I always try to preserve on productions with Sofia, but also just in general, because it really is hard. You're always trying to get a lot done, and it's nice to be able to allow space for interesting and magical things to happen, maybe, or not, but to try to let that happen. That was a big thing that I learned on that production,
Yeah, we both learned so much from Harris, and I love his kind of motto of keep it simple.
Yeah.
Which, you have to have experience and confidence to keep it simple like that. And we had a whole kind of exercise for that film that we were going to try to do it with the least amount of coverage in the simplest way that we could tell the story. And it's fun to go into a project with kind of your rules of what you're trying at that time. And that was really defined.
Yeah.
Wow. So Youree, how do you feel like that kind of, as your first film, did that kind of like set your kind of producerial, if that's, or like persona for your future projects?
Yeah.
Like,
I was really lucky, and I was really like, I mean, first of all, like the fact that I was given this opportunity was so crazy, like on paper, I was completely underqualified to do it. And it was, it was a wonderful opportunity. It went really well. The film turned out fantastic. And it started a relationship with Sofia and I. And then I remember though, that it was very hard to pick another project after that, because all of a sudden it's nice, it's like you make a movie and then all of a sudden some new opportunities came. And I always was like, I still had a foot very steeped in commercials and videos at that time. And it actually allowed for me to continue to work and not have to take movies that I needed to do to get paid, and that was a real luxury, so I could work in advertising and then occasionally do a movie here or there. And I was pretty selective, and I remember once I tried to do a movie because I felt like, well, I got to do more. If I want to be a movie guy, I got to go do more movies, and I remember going and doing that. And I liked this filmmaker very much. And we were in New Mexico, and it all sort of fell apart. And it was really tough. I'm just going to admit it. I'd been so beaten up by this experience that I remember getting a call that we were shutting down, right? And there was a part of me, right, that was it was a little part. It was a part that I never wanted to admit to anybody, but I can say this now. I was actually a little bit relieved, I was actually a little bit kind of like, okay. And I knew flying home that I couldn't work on this movie anymore when it did come back up again, because I thought he deserves more from his producer than I'm willing to give at this point, because he deserves somebody who's not relieved when he gets the call. Like, now's the time I have to go back and fight and try to get that, like, things have to kick in. We got to get this movie made. And I knew in my mind I didn't feel that way. And so that was such a huge lesson to me. And I thought, I only want to make things that, like, they could take me 10 years to make them, but I need to be able to every day wake up and fight the good fight to get it made. And those things don't always come along. So you have to be a little bit more selective. And I've been really lucky, but that was sort of the somewhere thing kind of spoiled me in a way, in wonderful ways, but it allowed for me to have such a great experience that I could be more selective moving forward, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I I totally agree with you that I think making a movie, it takes so much work and it takes years. You have to do it for like 3 years. So I have the same thing. I couldn't work on, I know when I'm looking at a project, like I have to be obsessed with it, because if you're not obsessed with it, there's no way you're going to have the stamina to care about it, 3 years from now. And it just takes that much effort. So I think, I can't imagine ever embarking on something that you didn't feel have your whole heart. And I think that's a really good point to bring up when getting into something.
Yeah, I feel like it's like this series of little battles that you're fighting as a unified force. And like, so with you guys, like, how can you describe, I want to like walk through like what a fight, like one of these little battles, not a fight, like a constructive fight that you come out on the other side, you're better because of it. And like, I want to, like, what it, like a typical day on set.
We never
fight. No conflict at all. really smooth sailing.
No, but I feel like we have to go up to battles and then Youree fights the fight for me, or I have to go deal with something. But yeah, we don't have a lot of conflicts. Is that unhealthy that we don't have a lot of conflicts? There's always issues, but we can communicate.
I think part of my job too is that I feel like Sofia, she has so much going on making the movie, staying on track creatively, and she's written it, she's directing it, she's produced it. As my producing partner, we have to talk about budget, and we have to talk about a lot of things, and so it's very practical in terms of what those things are. But I also can't, like, I have to, there's plenty of things that like,
you protect me from.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that is, I know I can come to her for with anything and for anything, but I really feel like part of it too is like, a lot of these things just need to be taken care of,
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Not after they tells me like there was some drama going on, and I was like, oh, I had no idea, but I'm glad I didn't know, because I have so much I have to focus on just getting through the scenes of the day. So
totally.
Some things are tough. Some things happen, and it's always like, I mean, it's funny because a lot of people that you work with, they want to deliver good news to the director, but they never want to deliver bad news, So a lot of the time, like, you'll be the one I will be the one that then is brought the bad news because they don't want to go to Sofia to tell her directly. So it's always a little bit like, okay, cool, let me process this. How can we fix it, or what's the constructive solution for it? Because a lot of the time too, it's like stuff can be solved, so it doesn't need to go to her. Hopefully we can solve the problem before it gets to her, and we can keep the things that she wants and keep her on track to making the movie.
I love this idea of like the producer as like this sieve that just weeds out anything, that only the absolute finest and necessary problems have to come to Sofia. And I feel like just, from the time that I have popped in on your guys' sets, I just feel like it's totally, I mean, one, Youree seems to be just this like well-dressed man who's walking about set and is just has so much social grace and is just pumping up everybody and makes it seem so easy. No, I know there's probably a storm cloud happening, but it's just a sense of like calmness. So like, how do you feel like you achieve that like tone, Sofia? Like, just like there's just like a serene
atmosphere.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you want, I because I grew up on sets, I'm very at home on set. I'm at ease. I feel comfortable on sets. So maybe that's part of it. But I want to, you try to keep the atmosphere as nice as you can, because it's sort of like having a party. You invite all these people and you want them to come do good work and if they feel comfortable, they can do better work. And yeah, and you spend so much of your time on set, you want it to be pleasant, but I think you do your best work when everyone feels, in a comfortable atmosphere. And also I think actors have to be vulnerable and put themselves out there. So especially for the actors, I want to keep it protected and not, I don't want them to feel stressed out, because I want them to be able to be, in touch with what their emotional side they need to be for the scene. So I think, just being, and I don't know if I got that from Harris of playing music on set, or I've always done that from when I was starting out, but it's always nice to there's no reason you can't have a nice atmosphere and play music, and it's supposed to be fun, and it's like a playtime for your creativity, not just a grind, even though it is hard work. But as much as you can make it pleasant, and you're working such long hours, and you just want everyone to be able to do their best.
Do you curate playlists?
To take care of your crew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you saying?
Do you curate playlists for like the day before, if you kind of know a sense of a vibe that you can play like between takes or anything like that?
I wish I could say I did. We sort of do. Sophia's better at it than I am. I feel like I always want to do that, but it's always like there's so much stuff, especially when you get into production, like the idea of that. But we do have, I think early on we trade playlists. I think on the last one too, Rashida had some good ones, and you always have really good ones. And yeah,
we're not that organized, but I think just in the moment, just the moment you like, a song comes to mind that feels like the scene.
I will say though, Chase, that thing you're talking about, that vibe or the culture of like the on-set thing, like it's not always like that, and I think it comes from the top down, and it definitely is something that Sofia sets. Like I can't say that that's always the case. It goes outside of working with Sofia, like Sofia really cares about everybody who's there. It's a very small knit group. There's always like a, and that vibe is really important. It's very delicate, and you're hosting this experience, and it's really
yelling on set.
No yelling.
It's really important that people feel safe set. That was also a really important thing I learned on Somewhere. That was like we were shooting at the chateau. There was room for like 3 people inside of a room, and so it's sort of like, how do you create that vibe so that people can feel safe, and
don't you think
all of that stuff for Sofia? What's that?
Don't you think with ADs there's yellers and then there's those that don't yell? I think that's a really important thing I learned. Just make sure you have an AD that's not a yeller.
Yeah, absolutely. And even like nicest person, it's a tone of voice. It's like a tone of being talked at as opposed to worked with. And some people thrive in that. Some people actually they like that experience. We just don't. It's just not something that is. I really am not into that kind of set experience.
Yeah, but there is a kind of like scary authoritative AD style that I feel like when I was younger that I was just like the norm, and then realizing that you could find ADs that weren't yellers made a big difference on set.
One of the first sets I ever worked on, I was an extra in Detroit, in my hometown in Detroit, and I was like so excited to be there. Genuine was in the movie, the rapper. It was a bizarre experience, but the director was shouting at the top of his lungs, and at one point he got the wrong grilled cheese or something like that, and he was screaming about this grilled cheese, and it was terrible. It was like a party scene. It was terrifying, but I was just like, this is normal. This is how they get the job done. But I feel like Sofia it's the polar opposite, and just the way you talk, it allows for like these quiet moments just unfold in front of you, and
that's so funny. I love that.
It was wild. It was a really bad movie.
Camera is really important to come across in front of the camera, and I think also that's why people come back. It's like anyone who's had, the pleasure of working with Sofia, like it's nice to get that call, because it's not always like that.
Thank you. We have a nice team.
Yeah.
You guys do a nice thing where Sofia, you like to like screen a sort of movie for the crew or the cast you have assembled, right? Before you shoot. Is that something you usually do?
Watch a movie together?
Yeah.
Have we done that?
No, I think we sort of watch stuff. We talk about certain movies that sort of relate to certain projects, but I feel like maybe we did that on the.
We were doing that. Yeah, maybe you're thinking of the guy. I guess Jeannie was there. You weren't there.
No, I wasn't there. Oh, I just thought, I thought that.
Yeah, Jeannie, we'll say your sister for people that don't know who Jeannie is.
My sister Jeannie.
Yeah, maybe we looked at movies back then, but
I love that idea though. We should do it more.
I believe the DP and I looked at movies, like kind of to talk about how to shoot New York before on the Rocks. And just to kind of have that conversation, and we looked at some other, we've done that where we looked at movies just to kind of talk about that. But it sounds nice to invite everyone for screening.
Yeah.
Why not? Well, so speaking of that, sorry, go ahead, Youree. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I'm just having a memory right now. Also, not to make this all about Harris, but I learned so much from him, and And I feel like one thing that was really amazing, one of my really big memories of making Somewhere was, you know, we would shoot sometimes very late. We didn't have long hours, but sometimes, you know, call times require you to go later. Regardless of how late we went, Harris and its entire camera team would all be at like 7 o'clock in the morning at Photochem in Burbank. They would be screening projected dailies. And I wanted to learn and soak up as much as I could. So I would show up there, and I remember they were just sort of like, dude, what's this line producer dude coming crashing the party? Like, they were not, at first they were not into it. I remember Jason McCormick was just like, what? I mean, we liked each other and all, but it was sort of like, what's this dude doing? It felt like I was like intruding, like it was like a spy. And then I think Harris finally was sort of like, oh, he actually is kind of interested in this stuff. So like, what are we gonna say? Of course, let him in. And I remember sometimes we would play music, you know, Sophia, you were there.
Daily we play music.
And we would watch these dailies, and they were so magical to watch them printed and projected, you know?
That was the last movie to have a film finish negative.
We were able to do a film print, and I learned so much, like watching Harris. He would see things that no one else in the room saw, you know, and he was working with these people that I don't even know, I mean, if they're even around anymore, you know, like they were these guys who had worked at Photochem for so long, you know, doing film prints, and they could look at stuff, and they had like a whole language to how they would print, you know, and I was so grateful to have that experience, because even just the next movie, it was very difficult to be able to get a print made in the same way, because a lot of these people, the technology had shifted, the you know, Kodak wasn't making the same stocks, and it just changed. The world had changed, but at Somewhere was sort of the last one that way. And just remember his work ethic was insane. It was like you'd do a 12-hour day, show up in the next morning, just being there, and then his energy was really on, and I learned a lot from him in those rooms.
Yeah, that's so cool. I remember those moments. Yeah, it was the end of that.
Wow. Yeah. And so are you guys really precious about what you watch while you're on a film set, or what kinds of culture you consume? Like, do you keep it in line with the theme of what you're doing, or do you put on something that's mindless?
You know, I try not to. I feel like I try not to watch too much. I kind of have to stay in my little bubble of making what we're making, and I feel like I can't take in any other information while I'm in that mode, because I think you shoot all day and then you just crash at night.
Yeah.
You're sleeping when you're not shooting. It's hard for me. Or now I have kids, so my little bit of energy left, I'm with them. But I feel like even when I'm writing, sometimes I don't like to look at too much stuff, because you kind of have to keep your head clear.
Yeah, I feel that.
I remember when we made The Beguiled, it felt so weird, because I wanted to watch the original, but I really made a point not to, because I was just like, I don't want it to even subconsciously spin in any way, you know? So I remember reading the book and then not watching it, but it was really actually fun to I remember it was really fun to watch that movie. Remember when we did the double feature at the New Beverly? And that was the first time I had ever seen the original one before out. And yours was much more adapted sort of from the book, but there were these strange sort of spiritual similarities, or there were these weird things that I was like,
I see it after, because I'd seen it a long time ago, so it was kind of in the back of my mind, but I tried not to revisit it, because I didn't want to be influenced too much. But wow, that's funny.
And when you're adapting a book, Sophia, do you even go back to the book while you're shooting at all, or no?
I don't know. I think I'm more just, when I'm writing the script, I'm looking at the book a lot, but I don't remember. I don't think I go so much back to the book once I'm shooting, because it's kind of everything I want to take is in the script now. I'm mostly going from that. Yeah. You remember us watching Heartburn when we were in New Orleans? When we were shooting?
We actually all lived together in this place, and that part I actually do remember. We watched some movies. I remember we watched Tootsie. I remember we watched stuff that was like way kind of far off. We watched Heartburn. We watched.
Nothing to do with the movie.
One of the great joys of working with Sophia too is there are these like cultural touchstones that are kind of nice that we appreciate. I want to tell you, I just recently watched Eyes of Laura Mars.
Oh my God!
Which you're a fan of. I was like,
Melody McDaniel. I guess because she loves that too. Just the glamour and the fashion photographer. If anyone was going to redo something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't watched that in a long time.
It's not. I mean, It's not great. It doesn't really hold up, but the world is so exciting and it's so amazing. And for me, at least, I watched it and I was like, I still love this movie. I love every eye movement that she does, everything. It's like a whole study in how can I just act with my eyes, because it's called The Eyes of Laura Mars. So I'm just really going for it. It's like she's almost like in a completely different movie than everyone else. You know, it's really, but it's fun to watch. Anyways, yeah.
What else have you guys been watching during quarantine? Any escapism you guys have been consuming?
I don't have anything interesting to report. I really enjoyed watching The Crown.
Yeah.
Oh yes, me too.
Part with Camilla and Charles.
So great.
I thought it was so well done. It was really fun. And then I guess just older stuff. What have we been watching? It's all a blur. Watching old movies, but Youree, have you seen anything interesting to share?
Other than The Eyes of Laura Mars, no. I mean, there are movies I kind of watch every once in a while because I feel like I just like them, and it's almost like it's like comfort, you know. So I'll watch them. I'll watch Tootsie's one of them that I just always love.
Yes.
Tell me that you watched Foxes with Olive, or
what I watched was Over the Edge. Actually, Over the Edge is again one of my
Yeah.
I think though, you know what I talked about? I watched a series of, it was like the weekend theme was, I mean, clearly it was like Teen Rebellion, you know? So I watched Over the Edge, Rumblefish, and The Outsiders as
Oh my
like
gosh.
over the course of this weekend with Olive. And it was really amazing to watch those movies. Like they all are like, I mean, I'll be honest too, I don't really get to watch movies as much as I used to. Like I grew up, like we would go to the movies, like that was what our family did, you know. And I really watched movies in a theater quite a bit, and I feel like I regret to say, like I don't ever, I mean now of course with quarantine it's a completely different thing, but even at home it's difficult to just put a movie on, you know, like regardless of the experience, how great you make it, it's still harder for me personally to like sit down, tune everything out, and just watch a film, you know.
I did that a lot during the quarantine, but I miss like the thing about going to a theater where your whole focus is on that. Like if you have your phone anywhere in the room.
Yeah, I know.
Whatever, it's annoying, but yeah, we watched Walk the Line the other night with the kids. We were having a music movie.
Oh yeah.
And we watched the documentary and that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, watching Dolly talking about songwriting and stuff was fun.
That is fun. Youree, I watched A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood for what I'm ashamed to say is my first time, and I did it on my laptop, and I just wish it would have been up on the big screen, but I loved it so much. It still had artist charm.
Thank you very much. Oh, that's great. It's yeah, Jody actually, who does a lot.
Has been on this podcast. Yeah.
Has been on the podcast before. Jody shot that and
At the DP.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
She did the miniature part too, or is that a whole different unit?
No, he shot all of it. He shot all the miniatures as well. There was one moment when Jody and I talked about, I think in Jody's mind, like he was like, no one's going to shoot a frame of this movie except for me. Right.
That's great.
But I think there was a moment when we all sort of talked about, we thought that somehow by doing miniatures that it was sort of a different discipline, that it required a different, almost like tabletop or something. But thankfully Jody did all of it and it's cool. Yeah.
Youree, this is going back a little bit, but I would love to know how you got into producing initially.
Oh gosh.
You come from a movie watching family, but how did that translate?
I think at first, you know, I started off, yes, I always had a love for movies. I watched movies with, you know, my mom was a choreographer, and she would always, what's that?
And an AD.
And then became an AD,
Wow.
you know, in television. And so I remember just also like just consuming movies, you know, like my mom would take me, I lived in a pretty conservative household, but she would always take me to go see anything with music, you know? So like, I remember seeing Tommy when I was a kid and Saturday Night Fever and all these like, you know, kind of movies that they felt dangerous to me, you know, they felt like they were outside of other things I was taking in at that time. And sometimes my mom would cover my eyes, so I saw some of the movie like through her fingers, you know, which was kind of funny. Anyways, but that goes too far back. I think that's what kind of got me interested in movies. I think then I started working in production. I did a little bit of everything. And then a friend of mine, Todd Hickey, asked me to produce a music video for him, for his friend's band. And I remember distinctly being like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, how am I gonna, you know? But I remember we had a budget of maybe like $5,000, you know, and I knew that I could get paid a little bit of money, and it was exciting to me. And like, what else was I gonna do, you know, at that particular time? And so I remember doing it and really liking it and feeling like I was kind of good at it, you know, like I sort of felt like I knew what I was doing. I knew enough from knowing a little bit of everything that I could do it. And we got through it, and I really enjoyed it. And I remember him, you know, you always take these sort of weird bits of encouragement wherever you can get them. You don't really know how much they're going to impact you. But I remember him telling me that he thought that I did a good job, and I thought that I did a good job too. And I thought, oh, wow, maybe there's something with this. And literally, like, every job, even if you don't, every opportunity you get, even if you don't really know where it's going to lead, it always leads to something else. You know, like, I can absolutely tell you in a few steps how that job got me to the director's bureau that got me to working with Sofia, strangely. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a pretty small world, and I just got in there and I worked really hard, and I didn't, you know, I made a lot of mistakes, but I also got a fair amount of things right, you know, and that's how I got started. I mean, initially it was really sort of like I kind of fell into it in a weird way, thinking that like, well, let's see where this goes, you know, and then thankfully I like enjoyed it and felt like I had a place doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Totally.
and that reminds me of a story my mom told me that always stayed in my mind that I thought was so helpful or inspiring is when she was, you know, like, I don't know, when she was, it was like in the 70s, I don't know, she's like in her 30s. She was really into doing these drawings. She does different visual arts, and kind of, she wrote a book, and she does different kinds of art forms, and she was really into doing these drawings with these straight lines. She loved Agnes Martin, and she would just spend hours and hours and hours doing these really drawing these straight lines, and she didn't know why she was doing it, and she was just into it. And then years later, when she was in the Philippines during Apocalypse Now, she had this ability to hold the camera really steady because she had like trained herself, and so she was able to make this documentary. And she's really good at holding the camera steady. And I just thought that was the best lesson of like, you don't know where things are going to take you, but you just have to follow whatever these urges are, and then later they're going to lead you to something else. And I always love that story.
That's so beautiful.
I love that.
That is so
That's
cool.
so beautiful. Hearts of Dark. I studied film at Harvard for everyone on the podcast, and when we watched Hearts of Darkness in our film class, people were banging the table like jaws were on the ground. That was one of the most like visceral viewing experiences that
It's incredible.
I had in my whole education.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. No, it's such a great for any creative person to be able to see what someone goes through to that extent, because it's like an exaggeration of the little storms that we feel inside. So yeah, I'm so glad that she was able to capture that, and yeah, that's required view, I think, for
Totally.
I love that. Yes. And I like you guys just talking about like transition points or these, you know, these turning points in your life. And for me, I was living in New York and kind of, you know, feeling very cynical. I was auditioning and acting and trying to write. And I was sneakily applying for jobs in like corporate jobs. I had this list of corporate jobs, and it was this very embarrassing, very shameful list. And I was going to get a job in China. And so I flew to China, and, you know, this big boss, you know, wielded me and said, this is our student from Harvard. She's going to take a job here. And I had a week to decide whether I was going to take it. And in that week, I wrote this script that I had been thinking about for so long. And I thought to myself, I'm just going to write it into a void. And if I come out on the other side of this week not liking it or liking it, I will not take this job in China and upend my whole life. So I feel like these turning points or transitions are so kind of important. And it's just, Sophia, you could talk about, you know, I know you kind of shuffled through different careers in the beginning of your kind of journey, and you can talk about like what kind of headspace you were in when you kind of felt like you took the leap of faith to go into directing.
Yeah, I never thought I would do that, even though it's so obvious, but just because you don't want to do it, like my whole family's in film business, I wanted to do something different, and and I was always into fashion, and I liked
Yeah.
things in that, so I thought I would do kind of magazines or fashion, and I went to art school, but it was always frustrating because I couldn't really land my plane and figure out, like I couldn't find the one thing that I loved because I liked so many different things, and then when I made a short film, I was like, oh, I get to combine all the things I love, photography and music and costume design and all this stuff. So
Is that Lick
so
the Star?
yes, like the star.
I love that film.
Oh.
That does not get enough hype. I love that film so much.
I don't know. I don't know how much sense it makes, but I feel like my style is in there, and it was fun to make that. And I shot it at my middle school where I went in St. Helena. But then it wasn't until I read the book of the Virgin Suicides and I heard that someone was going to make it, and I didn't want them to mess it up, that I started working on a screenplay just to kind of try. I just thought I would just do a few chapters and try to experiment with how do you adapt a screenplay, and then I got so into it that I ended up writing the whole thing, but I never meant to, and I didn't have the rights, and that's a whole story.
Wow.
But and that's how I so I feel like that book made me direct a film. I wasn't like, oh, I want to be a director now, I'm looking for material. I was just wanting to protect that book made me think I'm going to make a movie of it. And then once I did that, I felt like, oh, this is something I know how to do, and then I was excited about other ideas that I could express in that way. And
Wow.
I learned a lot from that movie. So
oh my gosh. How would the Lisbon sisters have fared in COVID quarantine?
no, I love that people were talking about them again.
Yeah.
We're all like the Lisbon sisters these days.
I feel like a lot of your characters would have done well in quarantine. Miss Martha would have kept a locked fortress for quarantine. You would have been safe in her clutches. Do you feel like when you read books, you can't help but kind of adapt them visually in your mind?
Yeah, I find that really annoying. I think that's one of the most annoying things about being directors. I can't just like relax and enjoy a book very often, because even if I don't want to adapt, I'm looking at it and my brain is like thinking about it in that context. So I have to pick things that I have already been made, or something that it's a lot more relaxing when I know there's no way to, because if it's something new, there's always a part of myself that's like, oh, could this be something? Do you have that too, Youree?
I do. It's such a bummer. I was reading Play It As It Lays again, and I was like, they turned that into a movie. The movie's not very good, but you immediately start going like, oh, this would be so cool, whatever. You just start, your wheels start turning, like, to not like, I'm not trying to make that, but you still start to, like, you exercise parts of your brain, which I guess it's sort of natural and healthy, but I would like to just read to read,
Everyone imagines the book in their head. Yeah, I totally agree. Everyone probably imagines a book, but then we interpret that as like how you'd make it into a movie.
You're like casting it. You're just like, oh, it's so weird. Yeah.
I love casting other people's projects. I get
really good at it too. You're very good at it. Yeah.
I get
wow.
It's fun. They're just fun. Like the casting game, we call it. Roman and I would do that growing up.
That's so funny.
To think about.
When you're making something, how often is it that you guys have like characters in mind when you're starting from the ground up, or like, when does that slot fall into place in the timeline of things?
Do you mean the actors, or just like it's developing?
The actors. Yeah, the actors.
I like to picture some actors when I'm writing, because it helps me. And part of the fun of writing is that you get to work with actors. So that's the exciting part. So it helps me to picture them. But then in certain roles, and then there's the fun of, discovering all the other parts. But I think it's this part of the motivation is to get to work with the people that you want to work with, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's different with different people. I think with Sofia, there's always maybe somebody in mind. I also prefer when I get a script to read it with somebody in mind. It's one of the questions I usually ask, if there's somebody that's, that the filmmaker is interested in working with. But sometimes those things don't work out, and maybe it becomes somebody else, or I think it's always different. It's always different.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys have days on set where the day ends so different than where you thought it would, and the way where you started, what you planned out, the scene you planned out, the actor brings something totally new, or something with the set, it kind of changes your view, or it's raining, or like, do you find that those kinds of days are energizing or incredibly stressful?
That's a good question. I can't think of like one monumental one like that, because it just feels like every day, that's part of it, is you have to be flexible, and we're always working on a short schedule and as low a budget as we can, so that we have the most creative freedom. And so I can keep, the creative freedom, the director's cut and all that. So there's always things that come up where you lose your location, or maybe this is for big movies too, but you lose your location, or something happens, or the actor wants to do something different. I think that's just part of it. And I think you just have to be as flexible as you can. And that's just kind of part of working in film, that it's not all figured out before, unless some people do like storyboard every frame and there's a different style of it, but the way we're working, you have to be sort of on the fly and figure it out as you go, which I think makes you not overthink things. You just have to, as much as you can, be in the moment, and you're just kind of problem solving all day long, or making decisions and to try to find your way. And as long as you're clear about what you're doing at the beginning, then I think you can make all those choices along the way, because it's connected to your original thing you have in mind. Is that?
Yeah.
I think it's fun and exciting. I mean, it's super. It could also be like the adrenaline junkie in me, that like I like the excitement of it a little bit. But I truly believe too, especially working with Sofia, like as long as everybody's making the same movie, then you can just sort of like. I wish the filmmaking process outside of working with Sofia sometimes was more like this, where it could just be a little bit jazzier. Like it could just be a little bit, I'm going to do jazz hands while I do that. It's a little bit more jazz hands, but no, it's just a little bit more fluid, because we do get really locked in. I mean, filmmaking is very expensive, and also like you want to come in with a plan, and also that's my job, is to part of my job is to,
Sorry.
that's okay, preserve that plan, but there's also like, I think it's exciting when you can be confident enough to throw that away because something new is happening. I mean, you mentioned it, whether it's rain or whether it's a tangent that a director or a DP or an actor wants to go on, to be able to chase that, to be able to pivot and chase it. That's exciting, because then you're trying to make the best movie, and as long as everybody's on board with that, I feel like that's exciting. That's wonderful. That's like one of the most exciting things for me.
Yeah,
Are you
part of it, like you were saying, if it starts raining and then it adds something to the scene, that's even better, because it's raining and it changes the mood. Or we're talking about like Colin Farrell, the character's supposed to be American, but then hearing him in his Irish accent, it made it actually more interesting. So there's just things, as long as you're open to them, that can add to what you're doing.
Yeah. Youree, when you're on set, are you glued to the monitor and watching every take, or how in the weeds are you? Are you on the phone? Are you?
That reminds me of the story when we were shooting like the sex scene between Kirsten and Colin Beguiled, and I was like on a little Apple box sitting next to the camera, and Youree was like next to me, because I was just like, I wanted to call cut because it's uncomfortable, and I'm like sitting like 2 feet away from him, like attacking her, and I just wanted Kirsten to be out of, like, I wanted it to end for Kirsten to, and he's like scratching her with his stubble, and Youree was there like, okay, no, like helping me not call cut and letting it roll and roll and roll.
Just a beat. I feel like it depends really. I feel like there are certain things you work on, and you feel like that's where you should be. It's always exciting, to kind of see the film while it's being made. But there's also stuff sometimes that's just like, there's other stuff that's happening, there's stuff that's happening for the next day or the following day or a week from now, and so sometimes you get pulled out of being away from set. I like being on set. I think also like everybody has a different experience, so there are certain films I've made where like I'm absolutely on set at the monitor all the time. I think working with Sofia, I'm sort of there when she needs me to be, and then I may be off doing, doing something else too, or maybe, I mean, that's the thing too, is sometimes like on Sofia projects that we do together, there's not like a video village. There's not like a bunch of monitors around, like people need to be able to see the work that's happening, but the culture of the set experience is very intimate. It's very small. Sofia is on set next to the camera usually. She sometimes has a handheld, but often she's looking at the onboard, and that's what's happening, you know. So it's just sort of like it's not really part of the culture of having monitors. I think maybe on the Rocks. I think maybe on the last one. Certainly on bigger scenes, you know, like the scene you mentioned, Chase, that you were in. I think sometimes that one we probably had a few more monitors up so that people could see all the stuff that was going on. Sometimes we break out more than one camera, but usually we're single camera, and there's not a lot of infrastructure around for people to be watching.
Yeah.
And also,
Yeah, so
also being by the camera and then having the script supervisor nearby.
Yes.
I hope younger filmmakers know how important script supervisors are, because I feel like the ones that were trained through film have a different expertise. I want Ava, who I worked with on the last film, to do a course, but she doesn't want to do that. But anyway, it's so valuable to have a pro that had worked on film, because it's I think it's different than the way it's being.
It really is. I feel also that having come up through videos and commercials, the script supervisor in like videos and commercials, you know, there really aren't any for music videos, and then for commercials, often they're just sort of like, it's a different job almost, you know. It's still important because you're marking takes and you're depending on how the director uses them. But I think the first person that I ever was like, oh, this is really a script supervisor, was when we worked with Mary Bailey, you know, because Mary Bailey was able to like break out things and talk about the movie and with a depth that like I just hadn't experienced that before. Ava's the same way, you know, like you guys can meet up and talk about the movie and make sure that there are things that she can talk to you about. So you guys are sharing a language on set and remembering things that are important, you know?
Help keep track of things, remind you where you are in the story or whatever. But that's so helpful. But Chase, on your show, do you have a great script supervisor, or TV's different?
We have a very aggressive continuity like supervisor who what I found that is most annoying is hair for a woman with long hair, especially. It's the most frustrating thing to feel like you gave a great take, but the important coverage, your hair was back here instead of back here, and now the script supervisor is all upset. But no, that's been a definite lesson for me. But we have a very intense video village, and I feel like frequently, for better for worse, like after a take, I'm looking to the producer, who's also just a great director and gives great directorial notes, because we have different directors at kind of every episode, to be like, was that good? Was that good? Or not? But I remember I was telling Youree earlier, Sofia, that he let me sneak into the little video village that you guys had on the Rocks, and I got to watch Sofia's coverage. And I think it was just me and Youree. I was like two chairs behind him, just hunched there with my headphones watching Rashida's coverage.
That was an interesting thing. I remember that is another example of like, we had a completely different location for that scene, you know? And then I think, Sofia, you went to that show in that building and you came back and you were like, is there any way? And it was really touch and go and a lot of phone calls, a lot of working it out. We bounced that scene to the end of the schedule. We ended up shooting in that beautiful cement room, you know?
Glad you let us shoot
but
there,
it was really like, that was one of those things that sort of like life kind of intervened and we ended up shooting in a different place on the fly. I think we even tech scouted a completely different location.
Yeah, it was. But I love that that's, I say it's great because you were like, let's make it happen, where another producer might have been like, no, we've already committed to the other one, we're not going to. And it's important to have a producer that knows what's going to make the movie better and also what's really important to you. Yeah, I forgot about that. I kind of blank out all the conflicts that happen.
We have to. I kind of do too. We have to in order to do it. You know, we have collective memory, so it's like,
childbirth. But
did you find are you guys reliving the glory of On the Rocks now that, you know, everything on set is locked down and you guys can't be on set freely?
Just sit and watch it over and over. Remember no, I feel so lucky that we got to film in New York before it closed down and to have like captured places, and we finished our mix like the in March, week before everything shut down. So I just feel for people that were like in the middle of shoots and had to.
I remember I was flying back and there were some people with masks on and I was like, really? Like, I mean, come on. Like you're walking through JFK and all of a sudden, instead of seeing like a handful of people with masks, it was like 5 handfuls of people with masks, but still a lot of people were sort of like, huh? And I remember being like, maybe I should get a mask, you know? And now in retrospect, I mean, it was such a different world. One of the interesting things was like, you never really know when you're making something, how it's going to, you know, how it's going to land or be received or any of those things. Like one thing we would have never have known was, you know, it was always sort of a bit of a love letter to New York, but it became even more meaningful for people to watch it because they watched it and went like, oh my God, I remember New York before COVID. And it was sort of like, it really made them feel nice, you know, and it added another layer to the experience of watching it that we would never have thought of while we were making it, even though there was an aspect of it, but not to this degree.
Totally. I know I was watching it. I remember it was one of those movies. So one of those movies where you put on in quarantine after you've been in a very COVID heavy kind of mindset of a day. You're like, why aren't they wearing masks? Stand farther apart. Stop.
I know. I feel like that when I watch stuff now. But I remember when we were watching that at before it came out, and there's the scene where Bill shakes hands with Marlon, and I'm like, no.
Totally.
Yeah, you look at it all differently, but it is weird, real life.
How do you guys feel about how, you know, the flow of production on set when everyone has to wear masks and when there isn't, you know, that free sense of like human connection when everyone's behind shields and masks and 6 feet apart?
Yeah, it seems hard. I shot just a short kind of commercial thing for a day, and I found it really confining and hard to kind of takes the fun away of just being together because everyone's so tense. I found it hard. So I'm glad to sit this one out until there's a safer way to do it. But it just seems it's already challenging. I can't imagine how you guys have been shooting during this, but I you know, it's cool to just figure out a way to do it, but I can't. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully when it'll be a different. Easier.
It was hard. I mean, I did something that we shut down, I think on the 13th. We were supposed to start shooting on the 16th, you know, we shut down on March 13th and then spent X amount of weeks trying to figure out how to do it. And it really, like the filmmaking part was pretty, was easy in comparison because now there's more information, but I think we shot in July and August of 2020 and it was, you know, it's really tough. It's very tough to, also like for me, I think a lot of the movie gets made in like vans and elevators and offices and human connectivity in the hallway when you're like, that's where like decisions sometimes are made or conversations that spark other things that make their way into the movie. And with Zoom, it's still very effective and there's actually a lot of advantages to doing it, but it's also like takes away the connectivity that I think is I think makes movies better, you know, like I think it's better to be able to have that thing where you're moving together, you're in close quarters and you're like figuring it out. And I think it's a different mindset. It's a different structure, you know,
Yeah.
It's probably more productive in a weird way, but it's also like, it's leaves less room for magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like
It's pretty rigid, you know. It's not. It takes the fun out of it, really. You know, like that's the fun of making movies, I think. And like 6 feet apart, face masks. Am I gonna die? Is someone else? Like these are very real things. I don't mean to be flippant. Like these are, you know, to ask a crew to come in to work on a thing that they might get sick. Like that's not cool. You know, like
it takes a lot of the social fun out of
you know, and it's just really it's just not. It takes like 90% of your bandwidth too. Like I spent 90% of my time making sure that people were safe because obviously that's super important. We're not even talking about the movie at that point. We're just talking about how to make it. The other thing too is like you don't get to put a disclaimer on the movie. It's like this was made during COVID. You know what I mean? Like, you make a good movie. No, you know? Yeah, it's hard to say like hard to quantify.
I just find it so distracting to be.
Yeah, it's very distracting.
Yeah. they need to put great inflation on everything made during COVID to boost everybody's score. Yeah. I find the one thing that I enjoy is when you have to get into a headspace just as an actor, the mask and kind of like the fact that everyone else is in masks, it kind of tunes you out from everyone else. And especially when you have to go to like a dark place or, you know, an isolated place, that works. Yeah. Well, it's been so fun to talk to you guys. It's been so fascinating to
exchange stories.
Maria's back
Back.
to warn us of our looming conclusion.
Thanks for doing this, Chase. It's fun to see you guys, and I hope your shoot all goes well and safely.
Thank you. Thank you. I was so good to see you guys and see your faces.
Thanks
Hope
for
we can
having
all
me. This
meet
was
in
a
the
lot of fun.
flesh soon.
Yeah.
Thank you to
guys,
everyone
for
at
joining
Film
us.
Roundtable.
Yeah. Thanks to the Film Roundtable team, Aaron Wild, Doug Torres, Matthew Wolf. Thank all three of you for taking this time to chat. And yeah, we'll see you all soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye
Thanks for
bye. Stay safe.
Bye.